Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first of this year's. Good morning, everyone.
Noise.
Welcome to the first of this year's. Good morning, everyone.
No.
Apologies about that. Okay. So, as I was saying, this is the first of the series of webinars which are being organized by Europe Direct Core Platform, and also for the benefit of those who are not familiar with the work of Europe Direct centers. Essentially, our mission is to bring to the citizens information about programs and initiatives which are happening at the European level and which have an impact on their day-to-day lives or also on their businesses. Last year, as part of our work, we held a webinar which focused on Malta's recovery and resilience plan. And this year, we will be delving deeper into the resilience plan, and we will be actually looking at each of the different components which together form part of this plan. And together with our expert speakers, we will be able to look at the specific reforms and investments which will be carried out within the framework of this plan and discuss together how this is going to benefit Maltese citizens at large. Today's topic is fostering a digital, smart and resilient economy. And I have with me today, once again, an excellent panel who I welcome and thank for their time. So I welcome Ms. Clara Klause, who is the Policy Assistant within the Directorate-General for Communications, Networks, Content and Technology within the European Commission. We also have Alison, Mizzi, who is the President of the Malta Business Bureau. With us also is Francois Grech, who is today here representing the Malta Chamber of Commerce, Enterprise and Industry. Mr. Godwin Mifsud, who is the Director-General of the Economic Policy Department within the Ministry for Finance, and also Mr. Omar, who is Director for Policy, Strategy and Internationalisation within the Malta Council for Science and Technology. Last but not least, Ms. Helga Ellul, who is the President of Core Platform, who will also be delivering our opening remarks. So I leave it to you, Helga, for your introduction.
Okay, thank you, Roberta, and good morning and welcome to all of you to this very impressive panel. And as Roberta already explained, part of our work really is to try and bring closer to the citizen all the instruments the EU is, in fact, starting to try and help all the European countries to go ahead after the pandemic. The one and most important one is obviously the Next Generation Recovery Facility. The EU put forward a plan of over 723 billion, which is in loans and grants given to European countries to do the right to start up with the right instruments to help this recovery. One of the most important one, and the one we are talking about today, which is the fourth pillar, is the third pillar is fostering a digital, smart and resilient economy. Now, in Malta's recovery plan, which is a total of 345 million, 54% are actually for climate-related expenditure, but 26% are focusing on exactly this part of the recovery of digitalization and making, going ahead with that. Now, we will address in the future webinars all the other pillars as well. But today, obviously, this is the most component. Now, in the plan, the reforms Malta put forward on this area are mainly to deepening the digital transformation through policy reforms with a focus on reducing the digital divide and promoting more digital skills. And the other one is to finalize and implement Malta's smart specialization strategy with a focus on fostering business research and development and strengthening public and private cooperation. So we look forward today to hear from our expert panel what is being done in this area. So with further ado, I pass on to hear from Clara and from Omar what is happening in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Helga. Yes, actually, in fact, on that note, I would like now to invite Clara from the European Commission, who will be sharing with us a presentation on the digital strategy of the European Union and the related measures within Malta's recovery and resilience plan, which you have in fact already touched upon, Helga. So I pass on to you, Clara.
Yes, thank you very much. Just to check, can you see the slides and yeah. They're not blocked by a Zoom interface, because I can also see you.
No, we can see it.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay. No, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here today. Like you already said, I am a policy assistant at the European Commission and the Directorate-General for Communications, Networks, Content and Technology, where I work mostly on the Path to the Digital Decade policy program. So we will be touching upon that today. Regarding Malta, my focus so far has been mostly on monitoring broadband connectivity in Malta, but I recently took over as RF Digital Country Coordinator from my colleague Valentina. So now I look a little broader at digital developments in Malta. It also means, of course, that I'm still learning about the Recovery and Resilience Facility myself and about the Maltese plan. So I'm very happy that Valentina is also joining us today. I understand that she joined as a guest. So I don't know if we have to make her panelist if she wants to intervene later, if there's a question, but we can see. But I'm glad she's here nonetheless. So let's get started. So yeah, I also wanted to give a little bit of an overview of RRF in the beginning. Helga already said the most important things. Yeah, so the idea is to give a brief overview of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, and then have a more specific look at the Maltese plan and how the plan addresses some of the specific challenges that Malta is facing in the area of digital. And then we'll conclude with a look at kind of next steps in the context of Europe's digital decade. So beyond this 2026 RRF timeframe, all the way to 2030, to the end of the decade. Yes, so just to repeat it, so because the Recovery and Resilience Facility is really an unprecedented EU instrument, because it provides over, like Helga said, over 720 billion euros to support member states in their recovery from the pandemic, and to support that in a way that makes our economies and societies more resilient and sustainable. And that includes making them greener and making them digital. And as you know, member states have to submit recovery and resilience plans, or RRPs, as I'll probably refer to them throughout the presentation, to the Commission in order to benefit from the facility. And in these plans, they set out reforms and investments up until 2026. And these plans have to meet certain requirements. So for example, at least 37% of each plan has to go to measures that support European climate objectives. And then at least 20% has to go to digital objectives. And as you can see on the slide, member states actually exceeded these benchmarks. So we received 22 plans up until now, And from these plans, so far they allocated almost 40% to climate measures and more than 26% to digital measures. So boosting the digital transformation really is a key priority here, and that also holds true for Malta's plan, which allocates 26%, so exactly the EU average, so to speak, to digital objectives. And in the case of Malta's plan, that's a total. Oh, I should have switched the slide, because here you can see it in comparison to how much other member states are allocating. So for Malta's plan, that's a total of 80.8 million going to digital measures. Maybe just a few more words about what makes the RRF special. So it's important to remember that this is a performance-based tool. So what that means is that payment is linked to the achievement of milestones and targets in the recovery plans. So member states have to submit payment requests that include evidence of achievement to the Commission. And we're actually still awaiting the first payment request from Malta. So this is a process that will unfold over the next years. And this mechanism helps to ensure that the RRF effectively, is able to address challenges that countries are facing. And we will look at some of the digital challenges for Malta now. Although of course I'll be interested to hear what you perceive as the main challenges as well, and if they are indeed addressed in the plan. But at the Commission, our tool to monitor progress and challenges is the Digital Economy and Society Index. We call it the DESI. And if we look at the latest DESI report, we can see that Malta actually performed quite well in digital. So it ranked 6th out of 27 EU member states in 2021 overall. I know personally, of course, that Malta scores particularly well also in broadband connectivity, which is an important enabler for the digital transformation, and which means that, or which I think means that Malta can, over the next years, focus on developing use cases for these ultra-fast connections that are already in place. And that includes, for instance, accelerating the digital transformation of public services and of businesses. So that's why I'd like to zoom in a little bit on how the Maltese plan addresses these two areas. Starting maybe with the digitalization of public administration and public services, because the Maltese plan actually places a particularly strong focus on this area. So as you can see here, it allocates or it includes investments worth 37.7 million euros to strengthen, among other things, I think those are the three main, to strengthen the government's digital backbone, to digitize the merchant shipping directorate, and to improve digital public services for citizens and businesses. I know that we wanted to kind of talk about implementation. I don't want to and cannot go into too much detail here, simply because this is an ongoing process, so I can't comment on it, also because we haven't received a payment request from Malta yet. But these are the main measures and investments in this area. Just for everyone to know, there is a public online platform called the Recovery and Resilience Scoreboard, which actually tracks progress in the implementation of the plans for each member state. So there's a specific section also for Malta. So if you're interested, I encourage you to follow that over the next months and years, and it will, data will start appearing as we receive the first payment requests and the first measures are completed. But maybe just to focus a little bit on this last point here, so to improve digital public services, the plan, for example, is to host services on more responsive platforms and to set up registers for data sharing and reuse purposes, specifically also for the clearance of goods and for property transfer. So these are indeed very important measures to reduce administrative burden for citizens and also for businesses. But of course, it will be very important in this context, not only to ensure the availability of improved digital public services, but also to encourage their use, right? So for instance, in the 2021 DESI, we saw that 63% of internet users in Malta use e-government services. So that is good, but there's certainly still room for improvement there. Now, moving to the digital transformation of businesses. So this is also an area where Malta performs quite well in comparison to other member states. Maltese enterprises overall show a high level of digitalization, but we do still see differences between large enterprises and small and medium-sized enterprises there, and especially that holds especially true for the manufacturing sector as well. So the Maltese RRP addresses this with a financial support scheme over a total of 15 million euros to help especially small and medium-sized enterprises make use of digital technology. So, and that includes a variety of measures. So for instance, in the tourism sector, it includes supporting the digitalization of logistics, but also exploring the use of artificial intelligence to personalize customer experiences, for instance. And then in manufacturing, there are plans to optimize the use of existing technologies and also better exploit emerging technologies like digital twinning or predictive maintenance and things like that. So I would say that these are very important first steps to support the digitalization of companies. But in order for Malta to really become something like a hub for emerging technologies, which is an ambition that I've heard, more efforts and investments will likely still be needed also beyond RRF. Although, like I said, I would say that the ambition and also the preconditions when I think about connectivity are certainly there. And yeah, now moving to digital decade, so leveraging these opportunities in Malta becomes even more important in the context of Europe's digital decade. You may have heard the term before. So when we talk about Europe's digital decade, essentially what we mean is shaping the digital transformation and shaping it in a way that protects our European values and our freedoms, that empowers our people, and that supports the competitiveness of our industry. And to achieve this vision, we defined a concrete set of targets for the EU for 2030. In the area, you can see here in 4 different areas, which are digital skills, infrastructures, businesses, and public services. I won't go through all of them, but just because we talked about digital transformation of businesses, you can see here that one of the targets is that 3 out of 4 European companies start using cloud, AI, and big data, for instance. And then there are also, if we look at infrastructure, there are some very ambitious targets there, like, for example, doubling the EU share in the global production of semiconductors, or building quantum computing capabilities. So these are targets that really require contributions and cooperation between member states and the Commission and the private sector. And to facilitate this kind of cooperation, the Commission proposed the Path to the Digital Decade policy program, which I would say it has 3 major elements. So the first element is that it introduces a monitoring and reporting mechanism to measure progress towards the digital decade targets. And this will be based on an enhanced digital economy and society index. So what we looked at earlier, it will be enhanced in order to be able to measure progress towards the targets that I just showed you. Then the second element is that it sets up a governance framework that obligates member states and the Commission to work together in order to identify gaps and then commit to joint actions to achieve these targets. And that can include multi-country projects. So the third element of the proposal is a new mechanism to set up and implement multi-country projects. So overall, I would say that what the Path to the Digital Decade program tries to do is to provide a kind of a strategic framework, right, to ensure that every policy measure and funding decision at union level and also at national level actually contribute towards reaching the digital decade targets. So similar to what's already in place with the Green Deal for environmental targets, for instance. We're still negotiating the policy program with member states and with the European Parliament, so it's still in progress. But I wanted to go into a little more detail about multi-country projects, since this is a concept that was already introduced also in the context of the RRF. So essentially, multi-country projects are large-scale projects that pool investments from EU funding resources, which includes the RRF, and from member states and from private actors to build capacity in strategically important areas. So that's, for instance, areas like blockchain or 5G corridors or high-performance computing, also semiconductors. So these kinds of areas, so projects that one single member state could not implement on its own. And actually, most member states have outlined investments into multi-country projects in their recovery and resilience plans. Malta's plan is one out of only 2 that has not done that. So that's something to consider, I would say, when we start thinking about next steps also beyond the RRF, because there will be plenty of opportunities to participate in multi-country projects in the context of Europe's digital decade, both for public authorities and also for businesses. And we actually have, this is where I come to an end too. So we actually have a dedicated platform to engage in discussions about this. It's the Digital Decade Community on Futorium, which is sort of like a social media platform from the Commission, if I may say that. So you can see here on the screen that the community is organized into different subgroups. There's also a subgroup on multi-country projects specifically. And each subgroup has a discussion forum where you can exchange ideas and experiences and best practices with others. And of course, you can also use the platform to stay informed about EU initiatives in each of these areas. So, for instance, we also host webinars on there that are quite similar to what we're doing today. So I invite you to join the community and to be part of this group of, I think now we have almost 600 representatives from businesses and public administration and academia and civil society from all over Europe, who kind of get together there to actively shape Europe's digital future. So yeah, I invite you to join. And for now, I thank you for listening, and I hope that this was that I was able to provide some useful input for the discussion that's about to follow. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Clara, for that. Definitely extremely interesting in terms of giving us a broader picture beyond the Next Generation EU and the Recovery and Resilience Plan, but very much where we're heading, not just as a country, but as a continent. So thank you for that. And also for what you pointed out in terms of how we can do even better. So thanks. Which leads me now to start the panel discussion. And maybe I can start with you, Alison, and within the context of what we have just heard now from Clara, also the country-specific recommendations which were given to Malta in relation to digitalization by the European Commission, because we also know that the measures proposed under the RRP are intended to, in fact, respond to those recommendations. How important do you feel that digital transformation is for the Maltese and also the European economy? And what are you expecting out of the recovery and resilience plan and the reforms and investments which are envisaged under this plan.
Hi, Roberta, good morning, and thank you for inviting me for this webinar. It's my pleasure to be here. Yes, it's very interesting to see, obviously, and it is by nature that the CSR recommendations for Malta are very much aligned with what has been identified in the Malta's RRP program, where the focus is primarily on the ICT take-up, digitization take-up for SMEs, where you have more push towards e-government and digitization of our government services. And also ties neatly with the reform of the justice system, where one of the recommendations of the CSR is to further reform our justice system. And in fact, one of the priorities of our RRP plan is the digitization of the justice system. So that we are very much aligned on that front. And this means that we're working hand in hand with the European Commission to implement investments and reforms in line with what there is as priority at the EU level and as well what there is for Malta. Well, the importance of digital transformation for Malta. Well, digital transformation is here with us, it's here to stay. So it's not only important for EU, for the local businesses, it's important for Malta in general. It's important for the EU, the global economy. And in fact, as Clara has already clearly said, it is one of the fundamental pillars of where the EU is, of the priorities of the EU. It's very much jointly at the level of priorities with the green priorities. And unless businesses embrace this digital transformation, then it is going to be a challenge moving forward. If you see all the supporting documents and all supporting priorities and flagship initiatives and whatever comes out from the European Commission, it is always about this twin transition of the digital transformation of the Green Deal. And even when we speak about green, the digital element has become also an important pivot in this regard to achieve our green objectives. So businesses need to embrace this reality. And in fact, I think they have already embraced it and they're already participating very actively in this process. And they have stepped up thanks to, if I can say that, to the global pandemic. They have led businesses to take accelerated steps towards achieving and adopting new technological solutions in their business processes. What we need to be very, very careful about this digital transformation is that there has been technology that has been available for a very long time, and some businesses have embraced it and have taken it on board. But we have to realize that businesses are taking it on board now as a result of the pandemic. So there are businesses that are more at an advanced stage than others. And another reality is, obviously, what comes with technology is there is always new technology coming around, and those companies, those businesses that are already at an advanced stage, obviously, are going to be in a much more better and accelerated position than others that are going to be starting now in the transition process. So that is a reality that needs to be taken into consideration to ensure that no one is left behind, because all different businesses generate the economy, support the economy, they generate employment. So it's important that the support measures are available at the different fronts. Obviously, when businesses decide to embrace technological transformation and digital transformation, they would have access to improved communication. It's likely to expedite matters, become more productive. There is more customer relationship, improved logistical networks. There are a lot of advantages as we have seen. We have even the opportunity to acquire talent without actually bringing it here and work remotely from different countries. So there are a lot of advantages. What we cannot forget as a country is that obviously there are people, the lower skilled, who are going to suffer more. And obviously we cannot forget about this. And what is interesting to see that the EU at its forefront, and even in our priorities as Malta, we put a lot of focus on the digital skills and the digital literacy. It is one of the CSRs for Malta as well. So if we embrace and bring everything together, hopefully the transition will be smoother. I'm coming from the Malta Business Bureau. We obviously read very much with interest that there is a scheme specifically targeting the private sector, and it's coming in the form of grants. It's received with welcome, and we are very interested to learn more about the scheme, about how it's going to unfold, and if at which point this is going to be made available and to be tapped into to ensure as much as possible to facilitate this transformation process. So in reality, we are agreeing on the priorities, the drive is there, the resources are there. Now the next step is to use these resources. So from the business dimension, now we are interested to learn on the next steps in this regard.
Thank you, Alison, for that very comprehensive reaction. I don't know if any of the other panelists would like to react to what Alison has said, and also the initial question in relation to the expectations from the RRP. Okay, I think, Alison, you have exhausted all the different dimensions to that question. So maybe I can move on to the next question. We have heard that obviously through the RRP, the Resilience and Recovery Plan, we're going to be implementing key investments in pursuance of the reforms that we have identified in the plan. We have heard as well from Clara's presentations that Malta has not yet made a request for payment. So it would be interesting to know a little bit more about the actual key investments that are currently being carried out in pursuance of these reforms, and at what stage they're at. Maybe, Godwin, maybe I can direct this question primarily to you.
Okay, good morning. First of all, thanks for this invitation, and welcome to colleagues on the panel and also to those who are following us on Facebook. Indeed, digitalization is a reality of our times. It is something that it's not about the future, it's about today, but of course with a reflection on the future. And it is something which we tend to hear over here, and sometimes, you know, when you hear something over and over, you tend to become a bit you become desensitized to the concept. Truth is that it is horizontal, it is enabler to provide goods and services, it is a facilitator of the creation of wealth and of jobs. So clearly it is a priority for all policymakers around the globe, including locally. Looking at our RRP, the RRP is a mix of reforms and investments, and specifically on digitalization. There's a specific component which focuses on digitalization. It contains two reforms and 4 investments. Though of course there are also 2 other investments under health and under justice that are also digital in nature. So the digital character of our RRP is well noted. In fact, around 26% of the investments in the RRP, of the expenditure in the RRP is digital in nature. That amounts to almost 81 million. And I think that goes on to give credence to the approach of the Maltese government with regards to the RRP, but more broadly with regards to digitalization. I think it's important to say that digitalization, of course, goes beyond the RRP. Government has measures and programs that go beyond what we will be discussing here. There's an umbrella strategy, the Malta Digital Malta strategy, which has been presented, and of course it is considered for implementation by the responsible ministry. There are strategies on digital technologies, strategies on AI. I think Malta has been on the forefront on these matters, and also other sectoral strategies. So I'm not going to be comprehensive here in all the measures the government is doing, because of course I'm not an expert on digitalization. my team has followed the preparation of the RRP, so I can give a broad macro picture with regards to specifics. I'm sure that colleagues at the Commission and others perhaps have had the opportunity to learn more about the state of the RRP in the mission that took place a couple of weeks ago, which took place in Malta. I think that there's clarity where Malta will be making its request for payment. It has been communicated, I think, even publicly. So, in that regard, there's no uncertainty. There's a plan for implementation. It's being it's in the works. So, when it comes to digitalization and primarily the investments, clearly, for what I think one important element here relates to the investment in the government's digital backbone and investment in providing digital solutions, devices, and tools. I think this is very important because it's a facilitator for government services, and the backbone clearly is very, very important in delivering such services. This will improve the resilience and security, and I think that in these times, it doesn't suffice for me to emphasize how important security is. So, and the investment in itself shall consist, of course, of designing, procuring, and implementing solutions, digital solutions that will improve the backbone security, for example, by improving capacity and resilience of data centers. Data centers have become an important economic tool in all economies. We deal a lot with data. Data is very important for us. And also implementing tools for cloud security, monitoring, data classification, etc. Of course, this will be supported by training and also awareness, especially with regards to cybersecurity. So here, I think a key project, a key investment relates to the investment in government's backbone. Another investment, key investment, is the digitalization of the merchant shipping directorate within Transport Malta. We know that shipping is an important economic sector for Malta, and here the investment will focus on development of IT tools, the document management system, digitalization of files, vessel management, etc. So this will result, of course, in upskilling of the staff, the development of specific IT systems and tools, and will enable the shipping director to become more efficient in handling, of course, its core business. Another key investment relates to digitalization and the modernization of public administration. So it builds on the other project, but again, it has public services in mind. So the scope is here is to provide better customer experience to both citizens and as well businesses, and to support the uptake of online services, and of course, more broadly, the competitiveness of the economy. So, in brief, the main projects under this investment relate to re-engineering the public and intra-facing services to improve delivery. So, of course, the way that we present our services, our apps, is very important. They have to be engaging. They have to be easy to use. We have heard about digital literacy, for example. So it's very important to keep in mind that there are, of course, people that have different skills and have different needs. So this is an important consideration. Enhancing the front-end customer experience in physical hubs. So we have specific hubs that are intended to support and roll out customer care. And here there's investment specifically on the front-end experience. The creation of a platform which connects all stakeholders in the property transfer process. And here we're talking about, of course, the banks, the notaries, the land registry, the public registry. And this will be based on distributed ledger technology, DLT. And the scope, of course, is to facilitate the transferring of the ownership of a property, exploiting, of course, the properties of DLT. And then this setting up of base and administrative registers for data sharing and reuse. last project under this investment is the introduction of a national single window for customs. So this would help increase efficiency of the process and contribute to fully digitalize and automate the clearance of goods. The last investment, and we've heard a bit on this, relates, of course, to measures to support digitalization of the private sector. It is intended to address specific gaps, as Alison was saying, with regards to investment, perhaps especially in SMEs, which are the majority of our enterprises. So SMEs perhaps need stronger support here. And the investment share consists of a grant for business to invest in digitalization. This comprises hardware, software, and digital solutions. This will help SMEs to enhance their operations and explore new opportunities. And the support will be provided to companies operating in different sectors, including wholesale and retail, tourism, manufacturing. So the idea is to have a broad focus on all main areas of activity. Of course, manufacturing. The instrument is a horizontal one. The date of implementation of this measure is June 2026. So, in connection to Alison's comments, of course, the responsible ministry is making preparations here to effectively roll out the measure. The implementation date is not 2022. It will take some time, but of course, given government's commitment to implement the RRP, this will be implemented in due course. Winding down my intervention, there are two further investments. The first one relates to health. So here we're talking about enhancing the resilience of the health system to digitalization, and consists of the digitalization of the outpatients and operations management process through machine learning, AI, and automation. This would contribute to effective resource utilization, time management, and workflows. Transforming the tissue analysis is another scope of the investment. And lastly, improving radiotherapy services delivered by acquiring modern magnetic resonance linear accelerator machines. So, of course, the scope here is to improve the quality of patient care, enhance and improve patient experience, and have, of course, more transparency in the provision of information and reduce waiting time. The last investment of a digital nature that is covered in the RRP relates to the justice system. The objective, of course, to support the reforms, the ongoing reforms that are detailed in the specific component of the RRP, and deals with improving the efficiency and administration of justice. So here we're talking about an investment which will support the efficiency in the way that our courts function. It will consist of two parts. It will consist of mapping and the design of processes towards digital processes, and secondly, there are a number of digital solutions which will include digital case journey, for example, judicial portal with dashboards, the investment in the courts of justice agency, improves the virtual settings, for example, enhancing. So there are a series of investments that are intended to digitalize the process, and in doing that, of course, this will lead to improved administration of justice. It will support, of course, the ongoing processes. So that was an overview of the main investments in the RRP that are of a digital nature. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Godwin. Certainly a number of investments which will be very welcome. I myself, as you are aware, have an affinity with the justice system, and I can't tell how very much needed that investment is. So we look forward to seeing that, and obviously all the key investments in all the other areas. Thank you for that overview. In terms of reforms now, because you've given us a good overview of the actual investments, but in terms of reforms, one of the reforms mentioned in the RRP is, in fact, the smart specialization strategy. And here I come to you, Omar. Perhaps you can share a little bit about what that entails and how that links to the RRP, and also the relevant European policy framework.
Yes, sure. Thanks, Roberta, first of all, and good morning. I hope you can all hear me well. From our side, as the Malta Council for Science and Technology, we are responsible for one of the iterations, as aptly described by Clara in her initial intervention. So, as has been explained, the RRP is very much a performance-based instrument, and the actual um, implementation of the smart specialization constitutes one of those iterative steps. The smart specialization strategy is in reality nothing new, and it is not being implemented for the first time by way of the need induced externally by the RRP. It is actually the second smart specialization strategy that the country has in place. The first one dating and covering the period 2014 and 20 till 2020. The reason of those timeframes are rather logical and probably obvious for everyone involved in this conversation, since they reflect and go in line with the funding, with the programming periods of the EU. What is so special about a smart specialization strategy? Because it sounds cool, it sounds something maybe a little bit complex, but in reality it's just about having a little bit of a smarter approach to the way we structure our national R&I frameworks. So completely, it's a bit of a policy narrative that is based on a number of considerations, and it's primarily built on this concept of the entrepreneurial discovery process. And that is a process by which we follow a bottom-up approach, whereby we talk with the stakeholders, we actually talk with the companies who apply for our national funding instruments, companies who have an interest and demonstrated interest in tapping EU funds in the area of research and digitalization. We reach out to the public entities, we reach out to all the ministries. So by way of that bottom-up approach, we've devised a document, a narrative, which identifies priority sectors, a number of priority sectors, in total six of them. And we try to prioritize because the idea of a smart specialization strategy is precisely to try and build on those areas where we have a clear capacity and demonstrated know-how and ability to move forward and improve our R&I performance. So for the purposes of our new smart specialization strategy, which was, by the way, adopted by Cabinet back in December, and now it is completely in the public domain, we have identified six sectors for advancing the national R&I agenda, including by funding support, and that's health and well-being, smart manufacturing, the sustainable use of resources, which as you can easily envisage, it covers also climate-related activities, aviation and aerospace, which is very much linked to our overall activities in this area, digital technologies, which is not just a vertical priority, but also a cross-cutting horizontal area identified in the smart specialization strategy, and marine and maritime technologies. So these six sectors were actually identified by stakeholders in a process that took, I would say, over 2 years to complete. The idea of the smart specialization strategy is not just to have it there to tick the box for the purposes of the RRP, but it is also there as an enabling condition to enable the disbursement of funding also through the structural funds, specifically the RDF grants that we as a country obtain at every junction of the MFF cycle of the EU. And logically, it's not just to have there a narrative, but it is also to structure a bit the ecosystem. So for this purpose, the next steps from our end are actually to set up a governance system to ensure that there is a degree of implementation of the strategy. And for that purpose, we are setting up 6 different thematic committees that will be entrusted to take forward a number of actions as included in the strategy. And there will be, of course, each committee will be responsible for its area. The membership of these committees is being decided right now, actually, as we speak. And the idea is that these committees would encapsulate what we call the quadruple helix in research and innovation policy. So we will be ensuring that every committee will have adequate and appropriate representation from the public sector, from private industry, from NGOs, as well as research and technological organizations or research performing bodies such as our university, AMCAST, and other operators which we have now locally operating here in our jurisdiction. I mean, for the purposes of the RRP, the smart specialization strategy has a clear focus because it's meant to enhance this private business, this private and public cooperation in the area of research. And also, it's also meant to try and steer, to try and raise the interest in fostering a bigger private expenditure in research and innovation. We're primarily addressing the latter as MCST by promoting opportunities through Horizon Europe, notably in the areas of the partnerships, so the industry partnerships that are also financed through Horizon Europe, through the new framework program for research and innovation. And it is in that area that we are mostly driving forward the actions and the prioritization, yes, if you want to say so, of investments by the private sector towards specific areas covered by such partnerships. So for the purposes of future activities, our council will also be engaging in a number of co-funded partnerships under Horizon Europe, notably in the area of health, energy, as well as the sustainable blue economy. So we're also envisaging by a concrete step and way forward this participation in a number of Horizon Europe co-funded partnerships where calls for proposals will hopefully start being launched over the next year, as they, of course, will progress then over the 7-year life cycle of not just the current MFF, but also the sectorial programs of the Commission, Horizon Europe being one of those key flagship programs.
Apologies, I keep forgetting that I mute myself. So thank you for that so much. Again, quite a comprehensive overview. So we've heard a lot about the different investments, different reforms, and I would like to come to Francois now. In the light of what we have heard about the reforms and the investments which are being proposed and which are actually in the process of being implemented as well. To what extent do you feel that these are going to actually strengthen private-public cooperation? Because I think that is key in the achievement of the objectives which we have both as a country and as a continent.
Thanks. It's a pleasure being with you today. And I think some points, if I had to look a bit at the overall and what we've been discussing today, is definitely there is a drive under the current RRP program to actually drive digitization of government services. My personal opinion, I would have prepared the balance to be inverse, to drive more funding towards the digitization of businesses versus the inward looking of digitizing some different government services, as much as they are needed. Don't get me wrong, I think they are essential as well. However, if I had to look at the essence, I would say we are in the situation where, as Alison has mentioned as well before, COVID has accelerated aspects of digitizations, especially towards our SMEs. They felt the need now to do it. Before it was like, yeah, could be doing it, we might not. But now it's like, okay, it's my top list of the agenda. And I've been in digital transformation for 20 years. So I've been meeting a lot of different SME directors, and most of their aspect now, it is on my top list. We need to somehow transform. Some know how it's going to be done. Some it's unclear. Some might lack some investments. So there is definitely the drive, at least both at an EU level, and I'm glad seeing it as part of the RRP as well program, but definitely more needs to be done from a local perspective as well to supplement it, is to help these SMEs to go into that transformation process. Yes, and I would gladly say COVID, for all its negatives, the positive side had helped the most SMEs and techno companies embrace cloud services more. So they've moved away from the, I would say, legacy type of activities and consider more cloud activities. So all the skepticism about that has, I would say, vanished today. So they're more keen on absorbing more technology elements, especially. They now realize much more that resilience is more important. And obviously having a way of providing these technology or their product services delivery in multiple locations, not being tied to a physical location, has been even more relevant. Especially, as you know, we have limitation of workforce locally. So we were being dependent on importing workforce to supplement some different positions. And that COVID has actually hammered it down, creating a problem of influx of new resources. So the need for businesses to say, oh, by the way, I can have people in another country servicing me in some other areas, and still my business is going forward, has become more crucial. They didn't see it before, but I think it's crystal clear to them now. We have obviously the lack of talent locally, and as much as we can absorb, it is limited. So there is as well the realization by businesses that talent needs to be maximized in the area where it needs to be. So if I have a company which is 20 people, 30 people, 40 people company, the pot of people need to do the intelligent part. So companies are more open to work on automation aspects, and let's get rid of the part which is, let me call it a bit the boring part, because I need the people that I need to focus on the parts which matter. And that's where I think more SMEs need help. As much as I see the RRP structure, I have 15 million going towards digitization of businesses. It's a good start, but it's nowhere near what is needed. Yes. So there is a much bigger drive for SMEs. If you consider the amount of SMEs we have, the state where they are in digitization and where they should be, I think there's a bigger gap, which is being relatively underestimated. And me looking from a commercial perspective, I like to put the money where it's going to drive me more end result. And I would say at the moment, our SMEs are the ones which are driving my GDP growth. If I improve them by 5%, I will get a 10% output of the GDP. Yes. So I would tend to prioritize the funding towards going on how am I going to help as much as looking internally to improve government processes is essential, don't get me wrong, bureaucracy has its costs itself, which translates to businesses as well. However, I would say the immediate need is to actually help these companies transform quicker, and therefore supplementing them with incentives or funds and different instruments which we can provide them in a less bureaucratic fashion. So not something that they will take 2 years to fill a form or make it complicated for them, and actually drive them to enable that transformation. They get more efficient, they will increase the GDP by default of the country. The government has more funds to actually implement other development. So that's maybe my point of view from that aspect. I feel we're doing quite a good segment because a good chunk of the money is directed, but I would say the balance, if it would have been me, I would have changed the balance, because I think there is much more end result benefit on the immediate seeking now to drive the SMEs. Those are the ones which are driving the employment. They are driving the sustainability of our returns, of our taxes at the end of the day. So I think that is one area which is there. I believe, though, as much as we speak of in digitization, and unfortunately I've seen nothing in the structure, and I think we should be addressed in general as a concept, it is less about technology. And I am a technologist, so I love technology innovation, don't get me wrong. I've been doing it 20 years, and a new toy is great for me, and the new technology is great. However, we are less speaking about technology innovation and more towards technology adoption. The technology is there. We're spending huge amounts of money to build the next cool thing, whereas in reality, 90% of what we need already exists and been there around for a good 5, 8, 10 years, right? So the question is, before I even dream of putting the icing on the cake and all the other niceties, we need to drive companies and SMEs to adopt existing technology. It's been there. It's known. We know what needs to be done. It will drive an economic benefit directly. Yes. So sometimes I feel, as much as I love innovation because it's where I come from, as a country, we need to drive more towards adoption because the technology is there. I like the idea of people saying, yes, we should have AI. Yes, but we have people who haven't digitized basic processes. Yes. So let's put the funding towards making sure that the basic processes are all digitized. Then we can speak about the icing on the cake to make it better. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for it. But I think sometimes we miss the wood for the trees, and we're looking for something which, okay, I put an AI in a company, it's excellent. However, it will help maybe some forecasting. What work will it do if these companies cannot even digitize their logistics and procurement and inventory management systems because they are all over the place? Yes, I'm not adding much. I'm not adding anything to the end result of the equation. So, and there are different maturity levels. And I would say if we had to look objectively at our SMEs, I don't think we have super high adopters. In the digital transformation journey, we have people who are starting, maybe a bit in, but I wouldn't have a lot of companies sitting on a fully transformed companies. So I think that is definitely maybe a different shift from what we've been discussing, but I think I would change a bit the focus, because I think the result will speak better in that way. Again, not because it's less important, everything is important in reality, but one needs to put some focus more on this, which I think is being neglected. And tied to it, which I think there is a big non-definition, is redefinition of the business models. I think we're speaking as well of digitization, but we're not speaking about redefinition of business models, which we need to help SMEs. The government's role and the EU role should work towards, and this is not only for Malta, don't get me wrong, I have customers in different countries and they roughly have the same challenges as well. So it's not a question of a Malta scenario, but we're looking at a situation where there needs to be a redefinition of some business models, moving towards more digital business models, which is not only a technology. It's not buying a technology and the software and you're implementing it. It's have you looked at your different objective of your business model? Can you use now, as a result of technology, shift your business model? I mean, whereas today I might needed my back office being here, I could have my back office in Bulgaria. Yes. Is it possible? Yes. Technology enables me. Can I do it? Why not? But companies have not come to redefine their business models to be able to face their increased level of competition or become more efficient in what they're doing. Yes. I think there's less focus on that. And a lot of SMEs are not yet come to a realization that it's not, let's do the same what we did and now we do it online. It's not just that. I mean, it will gonna give a benefit, don't get me wrong, but it could be a wider context which we should stimulate SMEs, and obviously the government plays and the EU plays a big role in. Let's look at digital business models. How are you transforming your current business model into a digital business model? Some tweaks here and there, and then we can supplement and help you transform that digital business model. I think that's where I see potential for growth. As I'm saying, in terms of this, the RRP specifically, there is funds which are directed towards the digitization of businesses. And I think the incentives needs to be structured in a way, as I'm saying, to stimulate this type of transformation in companies. So we just don't want them to buy technology or software, but want them to be able to review some of their aspects and transform to the next level. In terms of funding, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg, considering our number of SMEs and what is required to actually get them off the shelf. I think we would need much more in that level of investment in reality, but we have to start from somewhere, otherwise it's not going to get there. And my last point, which I would go a bit tied to the digital skills, I believe we've done a lot of progress on the digital skills compared to where we were 5-8 years ago. I would say, again, COVID has accelerated the appetite from the citizens to be more digitally literate, especially because some are seeing that obviously digital literacy, and I mean beyond the basic digital literacy now, going a notch up on what we said was basic, can drive them to better wages at the end of the day and better in return, because they can work remotely, flexibly from home. So there's a lot of more benefits. So I think there is scope as well, and I know we have a portion of the budget tied to it, to drive our digital, let's say, digital people who might be at a basic level of digital, to move them a notch up or two, to be able to start absorbing some more digital jobs which are becoming available. Yes. Obviously, the challenge is always, as Alison mentioned, there is a strata of people which might be not be digitally enabled, and we don't want to leave them out. So there as well needs to be some aspect of how we'll address that area. think that's all from my side, I think.
Thank you, Francois. I think you've made some extremely interesting observations, which also link to one of the other key reforms within the RRP, which is tackling the digital divide. And I think the points that you have made in relation to the adoption of technology, at least the way I have understood your comments, is that there is also this kind of digital divide, if you like, at the entrepreneurial level, not just, at the level of the citizen, because we tend to think of the digital divide on the level of the citizen, but also I think amongst SMEs and perhaps even larger companies, I don't know, there is possibly this digital divide, which unless we're careful can also get deeper and broader. So we're coming now towards the end of this webinar. I think it has been a very interesting discussion. We have heard some really relevant inputs from all of you panelists. So I would just like to invite a final round of comments and observations in relation to everything that has been said so far. Maybe Alison, I saw that you were also reacting to what Francois was saying earlier on.
It wasn't unmuting, I'm sorry. Hi. Yes, it's been a very interesting discussion, and it's been interesting listening to all of you. Obviously, yes, I relate to what Francois has said through his input regarding the obviously there is a lot of focus on this digitalization scheme for the private sector, given that we both of us come from the private sector and we represent the private sector, so we're keen to know what is this going to be about. I understand that there is the implementation, if I understood Godwin well, that we have till 2026 to implement it, but I did not understand whether there is a start date yet or not, but it doesn't matter. I am sure that everyone is focused and get this scheme as much as possible on the market. In terms of the allocation, 15 million is obviously it's always a good opportunity to have more, but I think it's a good start as well for the implementation of such scheme, given that we have to operate within the nature of state aid regulations. And obviously we have to see those companies that are able and willing to fork out part of the investment to carry out this digital transformation process. Obviously, within what is permitted within the law, the more that we can support the businesses, especially after the COVID pandemic and the impact it has led on the economy, the more beneficial it's going to be to pass through this process of all these requirements, of all these reforms with ease. The more level of support that can be for the businesses, obviously, the more impact it will have on the economy.
Thank you, Alison. Godwin, I don't know if you have any reactions to this.
Yes, thank you. I think this was a productive discussion. I took note of what all of you said, particularly what the comments by Francois, who I have never met in person, but I think he's very passionate about his subject. And of course, it's always a pleasure to meet someone who's an expert in the field. Clearly, digitalization is a challenge not only for Malta but for our member states. We're not, at least we're not in this domain. We're not starting from a bad position, but I think we're at a good starting point. Of course, that doesn't mean complacency. It means, of course, that we need to work more, and embrace this as a transformative process. The RRP is what it is. I mean, it is the allocation is 116 million. So there are other funds, EU funds that will also target digitalization. There are other national funds also in the context of the Digital Malta Umbrella Strategy. There are funds under the Development Bank that could be tapped. Malta Enterprise runs processes related to business re-engineering. So in truth, there are a number of services, and the RRP is not, of course, a solution to all these challenges. The size of the allocation itself limits of course, the level of ambition that would be reached through this program itself. But of course, I heard what's been said, and I think that one is to consider, of course, as I'm saying, the broader picture in this regard. With regards to the specific fund program, there was a milestone. The milestone is Q1 of 2022 for the launch of the program. One needs to check whether that is still going on plan, or whether there has been some slight delays. I think the election is also perhaps a factor that could be causing some delays here, because some processes tend to slow or stop. So, but of course, government is committed. If it's not the first quarter, perhaps there'll be some slippage in the second quarter. But this is something that work is underway and it is committed for implementation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Godwin. Omar, I don't know if you would like to add anything to what Godwin has.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I found also Francois' intervention particularly inspiring. Probably it was the most passionate, for sure, on an emotional level. And it also gave us, I think all of us, a little bit more of a practical insight as to the impact of digitalization and how also the COVID situation has pushed people at whatever level, whether it's in the public sector, private sector, to actually start using technological solutions. And this webinar is a practical instance of how much we have progressed in a matter of 2 years in doing this transition from the offline world to the online world, even for a simple matter of an exchange of views like this event. I mean, what I really liked about Francois' train of thought is the concept that digitalization should not be technology specific. And very often we hear a lot of initiatives coming also from DigiConnect, the level of the European Commission, on technology specific projects or programs. So I would have in mind programs like high performance computing, now the new joint undertaking for the semiconductor industry, which will transform the KDT joint undertaking. And very often we speak and we see funding going for specific technologies such as AI, DLTs, Internet of Things, you name it. And yet, what we really need in our local ecosystem is a technology neutral, a technology agnostic approach, because what we really need, since we are very often buyers of solutions that are already on the shelf, and we are not the ones who are creating those technological solutions, is actually technological solutions and products that are tailored for our system. And in that sense, there is a lot that can be done by way of the alignment of EU instruments, EU funding instruments vis-a-vis local realities. So you can find a lot of funding, for instance, for breakthrough innovation, but we don't have funding instruments that actually address incremental or progressive innovation, or at least solutions that can help small businesses. And when we speak about small businesses here, let's be frank and honest, we are not talking about the SME definition that's at the level of the recommendation adopted by the Commission. We're talking about another scale of business size, which goes well below the small business category as defined in the Commission recommendation. And we're talking about micro businesses very often, and it is at that level that there is the biggest challenge of adoption of digitization and also the promotion of skills, at the level of the staff. So I really see this at the level of the EU. I really see this lack of alignment of funding instruments with the realities of certain member states. And I would also see that the way the innovation policy is evolving at EU level is not necessarily always taking a technology neutral approach. And that can in the long term also create problems on the market.
Thanks, Omar. Maybe Clara, if you would like to add to what our colleague has just said.
Yes, I mean, I don't think I can address all of the points right now, but they're well noted. First of all, thank you. It was very informative also for us. A lot of very interesting points to consider. maybe first on the alignment of EU instruments, this is certainly something that the digital decade is trying to address, to better align different instruments so that they contribute more targetedly and also more contextualized to digital progress. If there's one point that I would have to pick, then I would like to really underline the importance of local support also for digital adoption of SMEs. This is something that certainly the Commission, that is sometimes, I guess, overlooked at the Commission. We tend to think in the context of member states, of national approaches, of supranational approaches, but this is something that we're working out right now, actually, to also think about a regional dimension for the digital decade and the role that regional and local authorities play in achieving the digital decade targets on the one hand, and on the other hand, also in benefiting from the approaches that are laid out on the national and European level. So, like I think Godwin said before, that it's not like we have to start from zero everywhere, right? There's best practices being implemented across member states in different communities all of the time, and this is also a role for the Commission, maybe there to make sure that these best practices are exchanged and can then be adapted to different local contexts. So this just stuck out to me because this is indeed something we're thinking about right now, about how to also emphasize the regional dimension of the digital decade. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Clara. Helga, now I come to you for your final remarks.
Well, it definitely was a very enlightening and I think a very productive session to hear all the different views. And I think it is one of the things which is necessary in this changing scenario we have to hear the different views and to try and align them. Now, obviously, as we heard very much from the business side, Alison and Francois, and I think Francois really hit the nail of the thing of going into our local scenario. And like even Omar said, I mean, we are not talking in Malta of SMEs, we are talking micro, we are talking one level below, and there is a big gap. Now, the pandemic, one positive thing of the outcome, then businesses had to readjust, and they realized that due to technology mainly as well, that they could use their workforce in a complete different working from home, working from abroad. But like Francois mentioned, and I think that is a very important one, the technology is already here and it hasn't been used by the smaller companies in the way it was already available. And they started using it now, but they shouldn't just do that. I think the most important one is to look at your business model and rethink your business model and use technology to come to a business model which is the future and which will take you ahead. Now, the only other thing as well, what we heard from Godwin, which was very important, and the big part where the big funding goes towards government to go and do more digitalization and also more on online services. There I have a bit of issues that it is true there's a lot of progress being made, but we need to make sure as well that all our citizens are able to really use it, because we can't leave the old generation behind. And there I see a gap still, which we are not empowering them, we are not educating them what is going to be done and how it can be for the benefit from them. And I think locally we need to find much more support for this older generation to do it. And even for the businesses where they have employees which need reskilling, because they are not up. We can't just say now, these are out of the thing, we try and find from abroad or we find the skills we need. No, use our people and reskill them. And there I think that, like Clara said as well, there's the local support which is necessary to make this step forward. But what I find as well very interesting is what Clara said about the multi-country projects. I think that's a very important issue, because let European countries work together. We, especially Malta, a small country, need to get, I think, into projects like that to benefit from our European collectiveness. And I think that is a very important one. We should maybe look a bit deeper into it as well from the government point of view, because I think we are not working all in isolation. We need to work together to bring the whole of Europe forward. And I think that is the most important thing as well, that it's a European for the future. So let's all work together as European citizens. But Roberta, I think what is important as well to bring that down to our citizen level, because I don't think there is a lot of understanding at that level, and then hopefully as well through Facebook now, that people really understand what is happening, and they need to, because it's for them actually, for their benefit, for all of our citizens, for all of our people. So thank you again, and looking forward to more of the webinars, because we have a lot of other steps into this whole recovery plan to cover. Thank you.
Helga. Yes, in fact, our next webinar will tackle the resilience of the health system, and that will be once again going live on our Facebook page in April. So in the meantime, I thank all the panelists and look forward to working together even further. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.